monsters, and welcome to the Horror Files. I am your host, Live Dana, and on this podcast, I dive into a particular horror movie each episode, providing insights and reviews, as well as the latest in horror movie news. And the Summer of Scares series continues, and this week, we follow up to last week's episode with a sequel that's packed full of weird old ladies, a funhouse that's anything but, and an inn that no one seems to be staying at or running. That's right, monsters. On this episode, I will be talking about the Stephen King sequel, It, Chapter 2, from 2019.
Something happens to you when you leave this town. The farther away, the hazier it all gets. But me, I never left. I remember all of it.
To the losers.
We made an oath.
Swear? If it isn't dead, if it ever comes back, we'll come back to it.
We didn't stop it.
Pennywise.
The clown. We can't let it happen again.
Hello?
Kid! Kid! Hello. Please. For 27 years, I dreamt of you. I craved you. I missed you.
We need to finish it. For good.
I've seen all of us die. It consumes us from the inside until we don't have a choice anymore.
You lied. And I died. You lied. And I died.
So IMDb describes the plot for It Chapter 2 as follows. 27 years after their first encounter with the terrifying Pennywise, the Losers Club have grown up and moved away until a devastating phone call brings them back. The film was directed by Andy Muschietti, written by Stephen King and Gary Dauberman, and stars Bill Skarsgård, Bill Hader, James McAvoy, and Jessica Chastain. Excuse me, before we get into the film, of course, just a few things. In the novel of It, Eddie wonders that he might have married Myra because she reminded him of his mother. And in this film adaptation, the same actress, Molly Atkinson, portrays both Eddie's wife as well as Eddie's mother. So that's kind of interesting. Isaiah Mustafa went through Stephen King's novel 8 times before filming so that he could fully understand his character, Mike Hanlon. Bill Hader, on the other hand, had read the book as a child and refused to reread it, claiming it was way too long, which I agree with. And in this film, Pennywise has only 7 minutes of dialogue in the entire film. I think in the first one, it's like maybe 4 minutes or something like that. And a license plate on the wall above the owner of the antique shop, who's of course played by Stephen King, says CQB 241, which is the same as the license plate in Christine from 1983, which of course he also wrote the book. And it's funny because he also asks for, in this film, $300 for the bike, which is the same amount that George LeBay initially offers to sell the car for in Christine. So I thought there's some cool little touches in this film. And at 169 minutes, this film is the longest horror film given a wide theatrical release. So let's get into it. Of course, as always, there will be spoilers. So in 2016, this is 27 years after Pennywise's initial defeat. He returns to Derry, Maine, killing a man named Adrian Mellon after he and his boyfriend are brutally assaulted by homophobic teens.
I'll take off the hat for you, but why leave it there? Anything else you'd like me to take off for you tonight? Any special requests, ladies? Let him go!
What's that?
Stop.
I don't think we need that.
Leave him alone!
Hit it.
He's got asthma, fucker!
Come on. Fuck him up.
Come on, kick him! Come on, kick this shit out, Adrian!
I still hate your fucking hair.
Adrian! Get the fuck off him!
Look what you did to his fucking face.
Hey, help me get him up. Adrian! Help me get this fucking punk up right now. Give me the hat, Chris.
It's fucking mine.
I said give me the fucking hat! Adrian! Welcome to Derry, motherfucker.
So I think, this particular scene, this is the opening scene, really. It's actually probably one of the most brutal and to watch. It's pretty upsetting. So Mike Hanlon, who is the only member of the Losers Club who remained in Derry, he summons the other members, Bill, Ben, Beverly, Richie, Eddie, and Stanley. And all of them return to Derry, except for Stanley, who, when he gets Mike's call, instead of returning to Derry, decides to kill himself. He just can't face it again. And Mike sort of refreshes the losers' memory, because what happened was that when they all left Derry, it was sort of like this weird, not like amnesia, but kind of like amnesia about what had happened. So they went into their lives not really, remembering much of what happened. And of course, Stanley, because Mike calls and is like, kind of tells him this is what's happened, begins to remember it, and of course decides to take himself out of the equation, as he says later. But Mike refreshes the losers' memories before it itself reveals the news of Stanley's suicide to them at a dinner that they have all met up for.
So wait, Eddie, you got married?
Yo, why is it so fucking funny, dickwad?
What, to like a woman?
Fuck you, bro.
Fuck you!
All right, what about you, trash mouth? You married?
There's no way Richie's married.
No, I got married.
Richie, I don't believe it.
When?
You not hear this?
No.
Oh, you know I got married?
No.
Yeah, no, me and your mom are very, very happy right now. Very happy. He totally fell for it.
Fuck you.
She's very sweet. Sometimes she'll put her arm around me and she'll whisper to me, she'll go,
We all get it. My mom was a great big fat person.
oh, no, hilarious. No. Hysterical. Yeah, it's a nice watch. Wait, let's talk about the elephant not in the room. Ben, What the fuck, man?
Okay, obviously, I lost a few pounds.
Yeah, no shit, you lost. You're like, you're hot.
That's true.
No, you're like every Brazilian soccer player wrapped up into one person.
Leave him
Gorgeous.
alone. You're embarrassing her.
Look, okay, all right, please, come on. Is Stanley coming or what? Someone save me. Stan.
Stan Stanley Urine. No, he's a fucking pussy. He's not gonna show.
Why would Stanley save you anyway? Was I not the one who basically performed surgery on you after Bowers cut you up? Holy shit, that's right.
Please tell me you ended up becoming a doctor, Eds.
No, I ended up becoming a risk analyst.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. What does that entail?
Yeah, so I worked for like a big insurance firm, and fuck you, dude. Fuck you.
Was this job invented before fun?
Oh, that's so not
That
funny.
is funny. He's like,
What the fuck are you laughing at?
I propose a toast to the losers.
So Richie and Eddie decide to leave until Beverly reveals that she has had visions of their deaths should they fail to fulfill their oath to kill it. Meanwhile, Pennywise lures and kills a girl with a facial birthmark at a baseball game. This one was really scary too. When this scene with this little girl, because I think this is like, it's the same thing as kind of Georgie in the first one. Pennywise is ultimately a predator, and it preys on kids because it's like they're really the most vulnerable, and he can make himself very childlike and charming and stuff like that, and they don't kind of have the sort of jadedness or caution that maybe adults would have, so they're a lot easier to get to come to him. And I think Bill Skarsgård really kind of excels in these scenes with his characterization of Pennywise, because he can bring that oh hey, I like this too, and people make fun of me, and all that kind of stuff. He can be very charming to these kids, and I think it's these kinds of scenes that really, I feel like, make Pennywise a lot scarier. So at the library, Mike shows Bill via this kind of drug-induced vision that this Native American, quote, ritual of Chud. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's got an umlaut at the top of the U. So this ritual can defeat it using items from the loser's past. So Bill goes to the storm drain where Georgie was killed and recovers his paper sailboat. I don't know how that happened. And then Beverly retrieves Ben's love letter from her childhood home before she is attacked by it in the form of a demonic elderly woman, which this was a very wild scene.
You haven't changed anything yet. You haven't changed their futures. You haven't saved any of them. Close your eyes, Bev. Fuck you! If you don't believe, close them and see. Yeah.
So Richie goes to an abandoned cinema where he collects a game token and encounters Pennywise, who confronts him on his hidden homosexuality.
Canal Days Festival. Closing performances tonight.
Hope to see you there, handsome.
Did you miss me, Richie? Because I've missed you. No one wants to play with the clown anymore. Play a game with me, would you? How about Street Fighter? Oh, yes, you like that one, don't you? Or maybe Truth or Dare. Jesus. Oh, you wouldn't want anyone to pick truth, though, would you, Richie? You wouldn't want anyone to know what you're hiding. I know your secret, your dirty little secret. I know your secret, your dirty little secret. Should I tell them, Richie?
This isn't happening. This isn't real. This isn't real. It isn't happening. It isn't real.
Come back and play! Come back and play!
So Ben returns to the town's high school while Eddie recovers an inhaler from a pharmacy and is attacked by the leper. So they're all collecting these tokenistic items that they need and that have some sort of special, significance to them. Meanwhile, Henry Bowers, who we remember from the first one, is freed from a mental hospital by It, obviously posing as his friend with the lighter. Bowers viciously attacks Eddie at the Losers Hotel before driving to the library. I'm going to talk some more about that hotel later. There, Bowers attacks Mike before Richie impales him. At a carnival, Bill fails to save a young boy from It. And that's another scene that's really was very creepy and effective, because it's so sad because, obviously he sees his younger brother in this little boy, and there's one part where he's like, please just take me. He's like, I think that's what he wanted in the first place, and is just feels horrible and powerless again to save this kid. So distraught, Bill drives to the Neibolt house, which is where the losers convince him not to face it alone. Now, the Neibolt house from the first film, obviously that's where they defeated it. So now their memories are all fully restored and the group descends into a cavern beneath the sewers. Mike provides a rock from the losers' fight with the Bowers gang, and they perform the ritual in the remains of the meteor that brought It to Earth. Now, the ritual fails as It emerges as an enormous Pennywise spider hybrid and pressures Mike into revealing that the ritual killed the original native performers. So that was the little part that he failed to reveal to all of them. And it attacks the losers and places Bill, Ben, Beverly in individual hallucinations. So they escape once Bill realizes his guilt over being indirectly responsible for Georgie's death. And when Beverly realizes Ben was the one who wrote the love letter to her. When Richie is made catatonic by It, Eddie saves him, but sadly is fatally impaled. And a weakened Eddie then explains how he made It feel small earlier by choking the leper nearly to death. So the losers now are like, okay, they confronted about how they've overcome their fears and that they're no longer scared of the entity, causing it to shrink down and down into a small, weakened Pennywise. So Mike rips out its heart, which he and the losers crush with their bare hands, finally killing it. They return to Eddie to find that he has sadly died from his injuries and are forced to leave his body behind as the cavern starts to kind of crumble and implode around them, basically, and destroying the Neibolt house. So at the quarry, the losers comfort Richie, and Ben and Beverly kiss. And later they find the scars on their hands from their pact have disappeared.
You know what? Eddie would have hated this, guys.
What? Cleaning ourselves in dirty water?
He'd be telling us we'd get streptococcus something.
Yeah. But he would have made us laugh, though.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be looking out for us. Well, he always was.
Is that right, Richie?
Thank you. I don't have my glasses on, so I don't know who you people are, but thank you very much.
So after the losers part ways, Ben and Beverly get married. Richie returns to the kissing bridge where he had once carved his and Eddie's initials. Mike moves out of Derry, and Bill begins writing his new story. Mike reveals to Bill that Stanley had written the losers' letters prior to his suicide, that Stanley was too scared to face it, and his suicide was intended to strengthen his friends against it. His last words in the letters indicate that they will always be losers.
So, I made the only logical move. I took myself off the board. Did it work? Well, if you're reading this, you know the answer. I lived my whole life afraid. Afraid of what would come next. Afraid of what I might leave behind. Don't. Be who you want to be. Be proud.
You sleep okay?
Yeah. I had a beautiful dream.
And if you find someone worth holding on to, never, ever let them go. Follow your own path. Wherever that takes you. Think of this letter as a promise.
So that's essentially it, chapter 2. I want to get into, of course, the details of the film, and then, just talk a little bit about my thoughts about it. So in February of 2016, producer Roy Lee, in an interview with Collider, mentioned a second film, remarking, Doberman wrote the most recent draft working with Muschietti, so it's being envisioned as 2 movies. In July of 2017, Muschietti revealed that production was set to begin in the spring of 2018, adding, quote, "We'll probably have a script for the second part in January. Ideally, we would start prep in March. Part 1 is only about the kids. Part 2 is about these characters 27 years later as adults, with flashbacks to 1989 when they were kids." In July of 2017, he also spoke of looking forward to having a dialogue in the second film that does not exist within the first, stating, quote, "It seems like we're going to do it. It's the second half. It's not a sequel. It's the second half, and it's very connected to the first one." He also stated that 2 cut scenes from the first film will possibly be included in the second. one of which being the fire at the black spot from the book. On September 25th, 2017, New Line Cinema announced that the sequel would be released on September 6th, 2019, with Gary Dauberman writing the script and Andy returning to direct. Dauberman would later leave the project to write and direct Annabelle Comes Home, while Jason Fuchs was brought in as his replacement. So, in an interview in July of 2017, the child actors from the first film were asked which actors they would choose to play themselves in the sequel. Sophia Lillis chose Jessica Chastain, and Finn Wolfhard chose Bill Hader, both of whom would end up cast in those roles. In September of 2017, Muschietti and his sister mentioned that Chastain would be their top choice to play the adult version of Beverly March, and Marsh, not March. In November of 2017, Chastain herself expressed interest in the project, and finally in 2018, she officially joined the cast, reuniting her with Muschietti, who directed her in Mama. I believe, she was the first one that was cast, and really the first one who was like mentioned, for the adult cast, as to who would play them. By April of 2018, Hader and James McAvoy were in talks to join and play the adult versions of Richie and Bill. In May 2018, James Ransone, Jay Ryan, and Andy Bean joined the cast to portray adult versions of Eddie, Ben, and Stanley. In June of 2018, Isaiah Mustafa joined as the adult version of Mike, while Xavier Dolan and Will Beinbrick were also cast as Adrian Mellon and Tom Rogan, respectively. Later, Teach Grant was cast to play the adult version of Henry Bowers. And this is actually the second collaboration between McAvoy, Chastain, Hader, Wexler, and Beinbrick after the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby. In September of 2018, it was revealed that Javier Bodet would appear in the film. He played it in its hobo and witch forms. So, So principal photography on the film began on June 19th, 2018 at Pinewood Toronto Studios. The sewer system was constructed at Pinewood, while the actual grate is located in North York. Much of the location work was done in and around Port Hope, which is in Canada, not in Maine. I made that error in the last episode, so I apologize for that. Port Hope in Canada, Ontario, during summer 2018, as the town stood in for the fictional Maine town of Derry, and signs and decor were changed as necessary. The town hall exterior was used as the Derry Library. Some exterior shots of the hotel were filmed at the town's Hotel Carlisle. So some interiors were filmed at the 1902 mansion in Toronto, Cranfield House, while homes in the city and in Oshawa and Pickering were used as exteriors. An old mansion set was built for exteriors of the Pennywise home and later burned in Oshawa. The synagogue in the film was actually the Congregation Knesset Israel in Toronto. Derry High School exteriors were filmed at the Mount Mary Retreat Center in Ancaster, Ontario. Other locations used by the production included the Elora Quarry Conservation Area, the Scottish Rite in Hamilton, Ontario, Audley Park in Ajax, Ontario, Rouge Park in Scarborough, Toronto as the Barons, and the Mandarin Restaurant in Mississauga. So, yeah, a lot of Canadian locations for this one, which it looked great. I really liked, the sets and the exteriors and stuff in these films actually are really excellent. And a good stand-in for Derry, Maine. So filming concluded in early November 2018 after 86 days of production. Visual effects were provided by Atomic Arts and Method Studios. And the teenage actors were digitally de-aged to match their retrospective ages during filming of the first film. I know some people really did not like that because it looked really weird. I mean, I get it. It's tough because, kids grow and they age, and it's been like 2 years, I think, since the last film by this point. So the kids would look different. They would most certainly be taller, and they'd also, definitely look different in the face. So It Chapter 2 had its world premiere at the Regency Village Theater in Los Angeles on August 26, 2019, and was released theatrically in the United States on September 6, 2019 by Warner Brothers. The film was released in a digital format, home media, on November 19th, 2019. A release on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K occurred on December 10th, 2019 in the U.S. Box office, It Chapter 2 grossed $211.6 million in the U.S. and Canada, and $261.5 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $473.1 million. Deadline Hollywood calculated the net profit of the film to be $169 million, when factoring together all expenses and revenues, obviously. In the U.S. and Canada, the film was projected to gross 90 to 100 million from 4,570 theaters in its opening weekend, and by the week of its release, broke Fandango's record for the most advanced tickets sold by a horror film. The film made $37.4 million in its first day, including $10.5 million from Thursday night previews, the second highest total for both a September opening and horror film, behind the first film's $13.5 million. It went on to debut at $91 million, also the second best ever for a horror film, and September release, while being over $30 million less than the first film. The lower debut was attributed to a more mixed critical reception, as well as the nearly 3-hour runtime, which some exhibitors said possibly curbed business. The film also had the 5th highest opening weekend for an R-rated film, behind its predecessor, The Matrix Reloaded, Deadpool, and Deadpool 2. It made $39.6 million in its second weekend, retaining the top spot before making $17 million in its third weekend and being dethroned by newcomer Downton Abbey. Wow, Downton Abbey. That's an interesting to be dethroned by that film. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale, the same as the first film, while those at PostTrack gave it an overall positive score of 76% and a 56% definite recommend. Writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, Richard Roper praised the production design and cast, but said the film was not as scary as the first, specifying, quote, for all of Muschetti's visual flourishes, and with the greatly talented Bill Skarsgård again delivering a madcap, disturbingly effective, all-in performance as the dreaded Pennywise, It Chapter 2 had a relatively muted impact on me. Variety's Peter DeBruge wrote, quote, the clown is back, and the kids have grown up in part 2 of Stephen King's monster novel, which inspires an overlong but suitably scary sequel, while Christy Lemire of RogerEbert.com gave the film 2.5 out of 4 stars, stating that, quote, It Chapter 2 can be a sprawling, unwieldy mess, overlong, overstuffed, and full of frustrating detours. But its casting is so spot on, its actors have such a great chemistry, and its monster effects are so deliciously ghoulish that the film keeps you hooked. Katie Reif of the AV Club gave the film a grade of C+, praising Hader's performance, but summarizing, quote, what a shame. Then to build this beautiful stage, populated with talented actors and high-level craftspeople, and then drop them all through the trapdoor of plotting humor and scattershot plotting. Asia Romano of Vox called the film, quote, well made and entertaining, but criticized what she termed the lack of chemistry between members of the adult cast, and wrote that the film, quote, muddles the message of the novel on which it was based. Rich Zerwack of Jezebel gave the film a negative review, calling it meandering and a movie that has no sense of its rules. The film also received criticism over Stan's suicide, as the film showed the suicide as a sacrifice intended to strengthen his friends and remove him as the weak link, whereas in the book he committed suicide purely out of terror. Critics from the outlets such as Screen Rant and Sci-Fi felt that it sent out a bad message to the audience, with William Bibbiani of Bloody Disgusting noting that it, quote, potentially conveys a message to the audience that killing yourself could be a rational response to dealing with childhood trauma. Jessica Laneshell of Bustle criticized the film as running the risk of glorifying Stan's suicide as a, quote, notable sacrifice, stating that it sends a dangerous message to those struggling with mental health issues. In September 2019, Skarsgård spoke of a possibility of a third installment, saying, quote, it would have to be the right type of approach to it. The book ends where the second movie ends, so that is the final chapter of this story. There is this interesting aspect of going back in time before all of this happened. There might be a story there that might be worth exploring. Obviously, that would be a story that's not in the book. It would be a freestanding story, but obviously within the same universe. So there might be something interesting out of it. I think it would be fun. So 2 months after that, Doberman discussed in an interview of the possibility of a third film, saying, quote, I do think it's possible. Anything in the Stephen King universe interests me, but there's only so much of the story we can tell in the two movies. There are definitely elements of the novel you can expand on and make its own movie. It's just a question of whether or not people want to see it. I do think it was on this planet for a very, very, very long time. And that's a lot of bloodshed and a lot of stories to tell. And I think you could do that for sure. So in March of 2022, Variety reported that Andy Muschietti, Barbara Muschietti, and Jason Fuchs were in development of and executive producing a prequel television series of It for HBO Max titled Welcome to Derry, which takes place in the 1960s before the events of the film and will also include the origin story of Pennywise the Clown. It received a production commitment in November of 2022, and Fuchs and Brad Caleb Kane were hired as co-showrunners. In February of 2023, the series was given the green light and was reported that Andy Muschietti would direct multiple episodes, including the pilot, with Fuchs serving as writer. In April 2023, Jovan Adepo, Chris Chalk, Taylor Page, and James Remar joined the cast in starring roles. Additionally, Stephen Ryder joined as a series regular and Madeline Stowe as a reoccurring guest. So principal photography began on Welcome to Derry in Toronto, Hamilton, and Port Hope in May of 2023 under the shooting title Greetings from Fairview, and was expected to continue through December. And scenes were shot at the Delta Secondary School in mid-July. Production was suspended due to the SAG-AFTRA strike. In May of 2024, Bill Skarsgård was cast to star and executive produce the series, reprising his role as Pennywise. It was also reported that the series will consist of 9 episodes, with Muschietti directing the first 4. In June, Alexandra Fuchs, Kimberly Guerrero, Dorian Gray, Thomas Mitchell, B.J. Harris, Peter Outerbridge, Shane Marriott, Chad Rook, Joshua Ojik, and Morningstar Angeline were cast in recurring capacities. And in July, Rudy Mancuso joined the cast in a recurring role as well. So in August, it was reported that production of the first series had wrapped and revealed that the series was titled It, Welcome to Derry. We have just had this past week a teaser, very short, like I think 6 or 8 seconds for it. So it's kind of wild. It's very fortuitous that I just happened to be doing it as part of the series, and having a prequel, essentially an origin story for Pennywise, coming out on HBO Max. So I'm very interested to check it out and see what they do with it, because obviously, yeah, you're telling a very complete story, with it in It Chapter 2. But there's tons of material in there, and obviously it looks like they are going to explore some of that, which should be really interesting. So It Chapter 2 has a Metacritic score of 58%, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 62%, and a Letterboxd rating of 2.9 out of 5. My personal rating, I'm going probably about a 6 on this, maybe 5.5. And the reason why, well, here's the thing. The cast is fantastic. The story, great. So why did this particular iteration just not succeed? And because it did fail, almost in as many ways as its predecessor succeeded. And I feel like the first film sort of worked because it sort of served a healthy amount of nostalgia next to a collection of surprisingly excellent child actors. And with a successful cast of kids, it sort of enabled us to kind of reawaken our childhood fears and phobias, and had a plot that was more laden with a pervasive sense of dread and these sort of moody atmospheres, not to mention, the joyousness of like the kids on bikes aspect of it. I mean, we're following these kids, and the chemistry is great together. Their acting is great together. And they felt like real kids. They felt like, very authentic. There was an authenticity there. And it made for compelling and at times very terrifying movie watching. And by moving the story to their adult personas, I feel like some of that sense of wonder and fear is lost, obviously. But I also think it's an oversimplification to blame Chapter 2's failures on a lack of nostalgia. And I feel like instead why it suffers is it has, for one, massive pacing issues, and it sort of abandons many of the principles that made the first film so successful. Now, sure, some of this is due to King's writing, and to be fair, much like the front half of the novel is stronger than the back. But the film also pulls some of the King's punches, and it relies less on a study of what they fear and more on making the audience afraid. And it's a fine distinction, but it's one of the film's larger failures. And King's work often focuses on creating dread through familiarity. It's, making us see through the eyes of the protagonists and live through their often dark and tragic histories. And while we go on a journey to each of their pasts, the reliance is more on an effects-laden horror convention and jump scares than a real sense of human loss and suffering. That was my big thing. I feel like, though the film's opening is strong enough and the gathering of the losers is well executed, the entirety of the film's middle section, it felt like you were just kind of watching a series of horror vignettes, and not even strong ones, and less like a cohesive narrative. And all of this kind of culminates in a finale that's both somehow overlong and also insubstantial. It's sort of this set of circular chases and monstrous beings that all kind of blur together into honestly a thoroughly unexciting conclusions. And while, all the actors give decent performances, particularly, Hader, and Chastain for me, and McAvoy as well, this kind of reductive and aimless script sort of removes any sense of deeper sympathy. You feel bad. I mean, obviously you feel Hader's pain for losing Eddie. And I think that's one of the more heart-wrenching parts of this film that worked, but could have worked better. And again, bringing the length into it, the film is also really kind of crippled by its ridiculous length. I mean, I think it's 10 minutes shy of 3 hours. And that, for some movies, that actually works. You think about something like The Batman. That works because the pacing was right in that film. And it doesn't feel like 3 hours. Oppenheimer, sorry, that's a slog. And, it's almost kind of shocking to realize that it's only about 15 minutes longer than Chapter 1. Because it actually felt like twice that. And, there's no greater measure of a film's failure than it feeling long. And Chapter 2, in a lot of parts, feels really interminable. And I think one of the issues that kind of plagues it is that we don't actually get, it sounds weird, I don't feel like we got enough time with the adults in this film. We spent way too much on flashbacks of them as kids and also bringing in things that we never saw in the first one. They had a clubhouse. What? How did we not see this? I realize things like were probably added or either that or subtracted for time for the first one. But it feels like they're kind of trying to retell the story all over again in some ways. And it's, having a couple of flashbacks and scenes is fine, but it's just like spending way too much time with flashbacks on each of the kids dealing with new Pennywise situations that weren't in the first movie. And we're supposed to just understand that as memories they forgot. Okay. And the entire middle hour of the film was spent showing Pennywise basically fucking with each individual in the group, both as kids and as adults. It's too much. It's too much. And Pennywise himself here isn't involved that much throughout the film. I mean, he gets some cool moments, but he's barely there. And I feel like, this is the part where we deal with the trauma of adulthood. The first one is like going through not only what they spent dealing with Pennywise, but also in their own lives, being traumatized by their upbringings because, they didn't have the greatest childhoods. And that's also what brought them together as well. And so I feel like to not put, as much focus on that in their adult form, I feel like it lessens the impact of what happened to them and what they've kind of been through and why it's so traumatizing. Why these fears that Pennywise knows about them are, so upsetting. The other issue that I had here, and, more than the unnecessarily focusing on flashbacks of the kids, is the CGI. Now, it's not great. It's not great. So I can excuse bad CGI in some films, but some of to make them look younger was not super great. I get why they did it, but it doesn't really work. And I feel like a lot of the CGI effects are, like I said in the first film, bordering on cartoonish and not scary. And it felt like much more in this one. that old lady scene, that's a perfect example. Take that. The scene with the old lady in Beverly. Now, I remember from the original miniseries, I mean, she had that same conversation. But what was so fucking creepy about that was like, I remember that slurping sound that she was making with her tea, like overly slurping like a dog, like it was, I was like, ugh, that was scary. And then the teeth, her teeth being all rotten, it was simple stuff like that really made it really scary. And in this one, we do get definitely that creepiness in a different way. And that's sort of like, you see her in the background, like just like naked or something like that. And then just like doing that little, kind of wiggly walk kind of thing that just seems weird. But it's like, and then she turns into like this big naked tit swinging CGI monster. And then it becomes laughable. I'm sorry, but it becomes laughable because it feels ridiculous. It doesn't feel like anything that would happen. Even though you're dealing with a clown from outer space, it's like, it seems so unbelievable and not scary. And this basically feels in so many ways like the same movie as the first one, except for some different ways that Pennywise kind of messes with them. And we get the Pennywise spider at the end, but they also kill Pennywise in basically the same way as in the first one, bullying him to death because the magic ritual doesn't work. I mean, nothing was accomplished at the end because I don't believe that they actually just killed Pennywise by ripping his heart out. I don't know. But what I kind of liked about the original one was that it wasn't anything that they had to do like that, which is, remove the heart or what have you, or find all these like fucking objects like a treasure hunt or what, a scavenger hunt. The thing about the original was it really is about facing fear, facing trauma, and saying, I'm not going to let that beat me. I'm not going to let that get the best of me. And it is supposed to be a manifestation of your greatest fears. And that's a huge lesson. There's a lot of stuff to glean from that. And the kids basically shooting what they've determined to be the thing that could kill it and having that work, it's all because they believe that it's going to work. They believe that this holds power, the power to kill it. And even though it's just a rock or what have you, it's that mind over matter, I think, mindset that really sort of gets at the heart of what this story is about. Not let's rip out its heart and squash it together. It's like, okay. But it's really just them believing like, hey, we don't believe you. You're full of shit. You mean nothing. We're stronger than you. And that's our fear. It's like you're facing your fear. You're like, you're my fear. You don't control me. You can't scare me. I'm going to thrive and survive, basically. And I feel like that's missed. But again, it's almost a 3-hour movie with maybe only about 45 minutes to an hour worth of plot that just could have been added to the first film. And I'm kind of upset at how good this could have been. Mike Flanagan was in the running for picking up the rights to do it before Michetti was given the job instead. And I kind of wish that I'd be curious to see how Flanagan would have done with this story. And Oh, the one thing also that I want to mention is this hotel that they're staying at too, because it's wild. They are staying at this hotel that nobody is running, and apparently nobody else except for them is staying at. This hotel is empty. It's so bizarre because they keep running back to it and it's just them. There's nobody else there. It's so bizarre. Excuse me. So yeah, that was, I just don't get how that hotel worked or was even in business. So I feel like It Chapter 2, it's far from a terrible film, but it doesn't even come close to the first one because what it does instead is it decides to focus too much on conventional horror tropes and really giving the short end of the stick to its characters. And it's somehow is a story that manages to be bloated yet hollow. And that makes its length a significant problem. And ultimately results in a mostly forgettable experience. I feel like instead of building on the foundation of its first entry, we're kind of left with seeing a strong cast wasted and an engaging story sort of capped by an ultimately lackluster sequel, which is unfortunate. I feel like it really had a lot of potential, but I feel like the length doesn't do it the service. I feel like the flashbacks, the reliance on the flashbacks and not enough on the adult cast here and now, and the overuse of CGI, I think is really this three-pronged problem that ultimately just doesn't make it as strong of a film, unfortunately, in my opinion. So this movie is available to watch on Amazon Prime, YouTube, Google Play, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. That was It Chapter 2 because, again, this is kind of a long episode. No Horror Files News Corner for this week. However, it will be back for next week's episode, so stay tuned for that. So that's it for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, you can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Threads at DeadAliveDana. And if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes or movies for me to talk about, you can email me at deadalivedana@gmail.com. And until next time, monsters, stay safe, and most importantly, stay spooky.